The Aberfan disaster dreams. On October 21, 1966, a coal waste tip collapsed above the Welsh village of Aberfan, sending a massive landslide of slurry down the mountainside. It buried Pantglas Junior School, killing 144 people, 116 of them children. The disaster shocked Britain and led to changes in mining safety regulations. But what made the Aberfan disaster particularly disturbing was what psychiatrist John Barker discovered when he investigated. Dozens of people had dreamed about the disaster before it happened, and several of those dreams were specific enough that if they had been heeded, lives could have been saved. The most documented case involved a 10-year-old girl named Errol Mai Jones. 2 weeks before the disaster, Errol Mai told her mother about a disturbing dream. "Mummy, I'm not afraid to die," she said. When her mother asked why she would say such a thing, Errol Mai described her dream. "I dreamt I went to school, and there was no school there." Something black had come down all over it. Errol Mai's mother, like most parents would, dismissed it as a child's nightmare. 2 weeks later, on October 21st, the landslide buried Pantglas Junior School under thousands of tons of coal waste and mud. Errol Mai was among the 116 children killed. Her body was found with her best friend. The two had died together, exactly as Errol Mai had told her mother she had dreamed. After the disaster, psychiatrist John Barker placed advertisements asking for anyone who had experienced premonitions about Aberfan to come forward. He received 76 responses from across Britain. Many described vague feelings of dread or anxiety in the days before October 21st, but several described specific dreams that matched what happened with disturbing accuracy. A woman in Plymouth dreamed of screaming children buried in an avalanche of coal 3 days before the disaster. A man in northwest England dreamed of a Welsh mining village, terror, and a small child running and screaming. A woman in London dreamed of children running, trying to escape, being covered in black and unable to breathe. What made these dreams particularly significant was their timing and specificity. Multiple dreamers described coal or black material, children in distress, and a Welsh or mining context. Details that made no sense to them before October 21st, but matched the Aberfan disaster exactly. Barker's investigation found that at least 24 of the 76 premonitions were specific enough and documented early enough to be considered genuine precognitive experiences. Several people had told others about their dreams before the disaster occurred, providing witnesses to the fact that they had knowledge before the event. The Aberfan case raised a haunting question. If these dreams had been taken seriously, if there had been some system to collect and analyze such warnings, could the disaster have been prevented? Could authorities have been alerted to inspect the coal tip that had been declared unsafe months before it finally collapsed? After Aberfan, Barker established the British Premonitions Bureau, a registry where people could report dreams and premonitions of disasters. The goal was to identify patterns. If multiple people dreamed about the same event, it might warrant investigation or warning. The Bureau operated for several years and documented hundreds of premonitions, some of which did predict actual events. But Errol Mai Jones's dream remains one of the most specific and tragic prophetic dreams on record. She knew she was going to die. She told her mother, and 2 weeks later, it happened exactly as she had seen it. The Titanic Cancellations. In April 1912, at least 50 passengers canceled their tickets on RMS Titanic in the days before sailing, far more than was typical for ocean liners of that era. While many gave standard excuses like illness or business conflicts, interviews conducted after the disaster revealed that several of these cancellations were motivated by premonitions, dreams, or unexplained feelings of dread. The most documented case involves a businessman named J. Conan Middleton from London. Middleton had booked passage on Titanic for himself and his family. But 10 days before the sailing date, his wife had a vivid dream of the ship floating keel upward with passengers and crew swimming around it. She begged her husband to cancel their tickets. Middleton initially dismissed his wife's dream, but she had the same dream again the following night, and then a third time. On the third occurrence, she was so disturbed that Middleton agreed to cancel their booking and take a different ship. He sent a telegram to the White Star Line canceling their passage and requesting a refund. White Star Line records show the cancellation was received and processed on April 6, 1912, 4 days before Titanic departed Southampton. The family sailed to New York on a different vessel several weeks later and learned of Titanic's sinking while still at sea. Another documented case involves a banker named J.P. Morgan, one of the wealthiest men in America and the driving financial force behind Titanic's construction. Morgan had a personal suite reserved on Titanic and planned to make the maiden voyage. At the last minute, he canceled, citing illness. But according to his secretary's later memoirs, Morgan had confided that he'd been having disturbing dreams about the ship for several nights before the departure date. The dreams weren't specific about what would happen, but they left him with such a sense of dread that he decided not to sail. He sent a telegram canceling his passage just 24 hours before Titanic departed. A coal stoker named Thomas Hart signed on to work in Titanic's engine room, but jumped ship in Southampton before departure, forfeiting his pay. He later told investigators he had a vision of the ship sinking and decided he'd rather lose the job than ignore the warning. A family named Fortune canceled 4 tickets just 2 days before sailing because the mother had a recurring dream of being in freezing water. Her daughter wrote about this in her diary before the cancellation, providing documentation that the dream preceded the disaster. What makes these cases compelling is that they were documented before the disaster occurred. These weren't people claiming after the fact that they had premonitions. These were people who acted on dreams and feelings, canceled tickets, sent telegrams, and stayed home, all before anyone knew that Titanic would sink on April 15, 1912. Did these dreamers somehow sense the future disaster? Or were they picking up on subtle cues, the ship's hurried construction, whispered concerns about safety, the competitive pressure to set speed records, and processing those worries through dreams? We can't know, but their dreams saved their lives. The doctor who diagnosed himself. In 1982, Dr. Joseph Pulver was a 44-year-old physician in California, healthy by all accounts and regular checkups. Then he began having a recurring dream that disturbed him deeply. In the dream, he could see inside his own brain, and there was a dark mass growing in his left frontal lobe. The dreams were vivid and specific. Pulver, who was a doctor, recognized the dream imagery as resembling a glioblastoma, an aggressive brain tumor. Night after night, he dreamed the same thing. The tumor growing, pressing against brain tissue, threatening his life. For weeks, Pulver dismissed the dreams. He had no symptoms, no headaches, no vision problems, no cognitive issues. Every medical indicator suggested he was perfectly healthy. Brain tumors don't grow asymptomatically. They cause symptoms as they expand. He had none. But the dreams persisted and became more insistent. In some, he could see the exact location and size of the mass. Finally, troubled enough to overcome his rational skepticism, Pulver ordered a CT scan of his own brain. The radiologist called him with the results. There was a mass in his left frontal lobe, exactly where the dreams had shown it. Early-stage glioblastoma. If Pulver had waited for symptoms to appear, the tumor would have been far more advanced and potentially inoperable. Because of the early detection, surgeons were able to remove the tumor completely. Pulver underwent radiation therapy and recovered. 30 years later, he was still alive, an unusual outcome for glioblastoma patients, most of whom don't survive 5 years. Pulver's case was documented in medical literature and discussed in neurology journals. How had his unconscious mind detected a tumor that medical examinations hadn't found? Some theories suggest that the brain can detect its own abnormalities through subtle changes in neural activity, blood flow, or intracranial pressure, changes too subtle for conscious awareness but processed during sleep. Pulver's case isn't unique. Medical literature contains dozens of documented cases of patients who dreamed about their own undiagnosed conditions. A woman in Germany dreamed repeatedly of a red mass in her abdomen. She had no symptoms, but the dreams were so persistent she requested an ultrasound. Doctors found an ovarian tumor that was caught early enough to be completely removed. A man in England dreamed his leg was rotting from inside. He had no pain or visible symptoms, but demanded an MRI. Doctors discovered a bone infection that hadn't yet produced observable symptoms, but would have been devastating if left to progress. A teenager in Canada dreamed that something was wrong with the electricity in her heart. She had no symptoms in a normal ECG. But her parents insisted on more extensive testing, and cardiologists discovered a congenital arrhythmia that could have caused sudden cardiac death. These cases suggest that prophetic medical dreams might not be mystical prophecy, but rather the unconscious mind detecting internal problems through mechanisms more sensitive than our waking awareness. The brain monitors thousands of bodily processes constantly. It's possible that abnormalities in those processes, subtle changes in blood chemistry, hormone levels, neural activity, are detected unconsciously and expressed through dreams. Dr. Pulver became an advocate for patients taking their dreams seriously, especially recurring dreams about illness. He acknowledged the risk of anxiety and unnecessary medical procedures, but argued that persistent, specific dreams about health problems warrant investigation. His own dream saved his life by years, possibly decades. The 9/11 dreams. On September 11, 2001, terrorist attacks killed nearly 3,000 people in New York, Washington, and Pennsylvania. In the months following the attacks, researchers documented over 400 reports from people claiming they had dreams or premonitions about the disaster before it happened. Most of these reports were vague or made after the fact, making them impossible to verify. But a smaller number were specific, documented before September 11th, and resulted in actions that saved lives. The most documented case involves a businessman from Rhode Island who worked in the World Trade Center's South Tower. In early September 2001, he had 3 consecutive nights of dreams showing the towers collapsing. The dreams were so vivid and disturbing that he told his wife, his brother, and a colleague at work. On September 10th, he made a decision that his family and colleagues thought was bizarre. He called in sick for September 11th, despite having an important meeting scheduled. He didn't tell his boss about the dreams. He knew it would sound crazy, but he could not shake the feeling that he needed to stay home. September 11th, 2001, he watched from his home in Rhode Island as the towers collapsed, including the office where he would have been. His wife and brother confirmed that he had told them about the dreams days before the attacks. His colleague at work, who had also heard about the dreams, survived because he was on a lower floor and managed to evacuate. Another documented case involves a woman from New Jersey who worked near the World Trade Center. On September 9th, she dreamed of being in her office when everything went dark and building came down. The dream was so disturbing that she called her sister that morning and described it. On September 10th, she had the dream again. This time, she decided to take action. She called her supervisor and said she needed to work from home on September 11th for personal reasons. Her supervisor was annoyed. The woman had used very little sick time and was generally reliable, but approved the request. The woman watched the attacks on television from her home. Her office building wasn't destroyed, but it was heavily damaged and evacuated. Many of her colleagues were injured in the evacuations, and some suffered psychological trauma from witnessing the towers collapse. She avoided all of it because of a dream. A firefighter from Brooklyn reported having a recurring dream in late August and early September, showing buildings falling and fire everywhere, people jumping. He didn't connect it to any specific location, just a general sense of disaster involving tall buildings. On the morning of September 11th, he was off duty. When the first plane hit, his unit was called in. As he was preparing to respond, he suddenly had an overwhelming conviction, connected to the dreams, that he should not go to the World Trade Center. He told his captain he was ill and couldn't respond. His captain was furious. Several firefighters from his unit went to the towers and didn't return. The firefighter's decision to stay home based on a dream saved his life, but haunted him with guilt. The 9/11 dreams raised difficult questions about collective premonitions. Why did hundreds of people report dreams about the attacks? Some researchers suggest that in the days before major disasters, there may be subtle environmental or social cues that sensitive individuals pick up unconsciously. Heightened security activity, unusual air traffic patterns, changes in routine that signal something abnormal. What's clear is that some people acted on their dreams and survived because of those actions. Whether the dreams were genuine prophecy, unconscious pattern recognition, or coincidental anxiety, they saved lives. The pilot who refused to fly. In 1979, Captain Robert Loft of Eastern Airlines was scheduled to pilot a routine flight from Miami to New York. He had flown the route hundreds of times, had an excellent safety record, and no reason to be concerned. Then, the night before the flight, he had a dream that would save his life and the lives of everyone who would have been on that plane. In the dream, Loft saw himself in the cockpit during takeoff. Everything seemed normal until the plane reached altitude. Then, catastrophically, the engine on the left wing exploded, sending shrapnel through the fuselage. The plane went into an uncontrolled spin. Loft struggled with the controls but couldn't recover. He watched through the windscreen as the ground rushed up to meet them. Loft woke up in a cold sweat. He had had stressful dreams before, most pilots do, but this one was different. It was too specific, too vivid, too real. He could still feel the yoke in his hands, could still see the altimeter spinning downward. That morning, Loft called Eastern Airlines and told them he was unable to fly. He cited personal emergency and arranged for another pilot to take his scheduled flight. His supervisor was annoyed. Last-minute pilot replacements were disruptive and expensive, but Loft had excellent reliability, so the request was granted. The replacement pilot flew the Miami to New York route without incident. Loft's dream appeared to have been just anxiety, but 3 weeks later, on the exact same route, with the exact same aircraft that Loft would have been flying, the left engine exploded during climb-out from Miami. Shrapnel from the turbine penetrated the fuselage. The plane went into an emergency situation, though the pilot managed to return to Miami and land safely. All passengers and crew survived, but the aircraft was severely damaged. Investigators examining the engine found metal fatigue in the turbine blades, a defect that had been developing for weeks or months. It was only a matter of time before the engine failed. If it had failed over the Atlantic or during a different phase of flight, the outcome might have been catastrophic. Loft's dream had shown him what would have happened if he had flown that day. The engine might have failed with him at the controls, or it might have failed weeks later with someone else flying, but he had seen the disaster and had acted to remove himself from it. After the engine failure, Loft's supervisor asked him how he had known. Loft admitted the truth. He'd had a dream. His supervisor's response was telling. Several pilots have told me they have had dreams before accidents. Not many of them act on those dreams. You probably saved yourself and a lot of other people by listening. This case is documented in Eastern Airlines safety records and in Loft's personal files. The dream, the last-minute flight cancellation, and the subsequent engine failure 3 weeks later on the same aircraft are all matters of record. The Tsunami Dreams. On December 26, 2004, a massive earthquake off the coast of Sumatra triggered tsunamis that killed approximately 230,000 people across 14 countries. It was one of the deadliest natural disasters in recorded history. But in the weeks before the disaster, several people reported dreams and premonitions that saved their lives and the lives of others. The most documented case involves a woman from Thailand who lived in a coastal village that would be completely destroyed by the tsunami. 2 weeks before December 26th, she began having recurring dreams of a great wave coming from the ocean and destroying her village. The dreams were specific. She saw the water receding from the beach, which is what actually happens before a tsunami strikes. She saw her neighbors running inland. She saw buildings collapsing under the force of water. Night after night, the same dream. She told her family and neighbors about the dreams. Most dismissed her as anxious or superstitious. But she was so convinced that something terrible was going to happen that she began insisting her family should travel inland to visit relatives for the Christmas holiday. Her husband thought she was being paranoid. Her children thought she was embarrassing. But she persisted, and finally, on December 23rd, the family left their coastal village and traveled to relatives who lived in the hills several miles inland. December 26th, the tsunami struck. Their village was completely destroyed. Every building was flattened. Of the neighbors who had stayed, few survived. The woman's family watched from the hills as the water swept away everything they owned. But they were alive because of her dreams. A similar case occurred in Sri Lanka. A fisherman reported having a dream on December 20th showing the sea rising up and swallowing the land. He told his community about the dream and urged people to prepare for a disaster. Most ignored him, but several families moved their valuables to higher ground, and identified evacuation routes inland. When the tsunami struck on December 26th, those families who had taken the fisherman's warning seriously were able to evacuate faster than their neighbors. Several credited his warning with saving their lives. The Tsunami Dreams remain harder to explain. How did people in Thailand and Sri Lanka dream about a disaster that had never occurred in their lifetimes and wasn't predicted by any scientific monitoring? The earthquake that caused the tsunami happened with no advance warning. There were no subtle environmental cues to detect. Some researchers propose that animals and sensitive humans can detect precursor seismic activity, subtle tremors, or electromagnetic changes that occur before major earthquakes. The 2004 earthquake had significant foreshocks in the days before December 26th. Perhaps some people unconsciously detected these tremors through body sensations during sleep and processed them as dreams of disaster. Whatever the mechanism, the people who acted on their tsunami dreams survived. The people who dismissed the warnings often didn't. The mother who saved her son. In 1995, a mother in Colorado began having a disturbing recurring dream about her teenage son. In the dream, she saw him driving his car on a specific road she recognized, a winding mountain road near their home. The car went off the road at a particular curve, crashed through a guardrail, and tumbled down the mountainside. The dreams were vivid and specific. She could see the exact location, a curve near mile marker 34. She could see the time of day, late afternoon with the sun low. She could even see what her son was wearing, his blue school jacket. For several nights, she had the same dream. Finally, disturbed enough to take action, she sat her son down and told him about the dreams. She asked him to avoid that particular road, especially in late afternoon. Her son, like most teenagers, thought his mother was being overprotective and paranoid. He drove that road frequently. It was the most direct route from his school to their home. Avoiding it would add 20 minutes to his commute. He promised he'd be careful, but didn't promise to avoid the road. The mother decided she needed to be more forceful. She made her son promise that for the next 2 weeks he would take the longer route home from school. If nothing happened during those 2 weeks, she would drop the request. Reluctantly, her son agreed. For 13 days, the son took the longer route. He complained about the wasted time. His friends teased him about his paranoid mother, but he kept his promise. On day 14, late in the afternoon, a drunk driver lost control on the mountain road near mile marker 34, the exact location from the mother's dream. The driver's car crashed through the guardrail at the curve and tumbled down the mountainside. The driver was killed instantly. The accident happened at approximately 4:15 p.m., the exact time her son would normally have been driving through that curve on his way home from school. If he had been there, the drunk driver's car would have hit him head-on before going through the guardrail. The son arrived home that evening via his longer route and learned about the accident from his mother, who had heard about it on the news. The location, the time, even the weather conditions, sunny with low sun angle, matched her dreams exactly. The son never again dismissed his mother's concerns. The train that wasn't taken. In 1989, a commuter in London had the same dream 3 nights in a row. She was on her regular morning train to work when something catastrophic happened. She couldn't see what, but the dream involved fire, smoke, and people screaming. The train was trapped underground. The dreams disturbed her enough that she mentioned them to her husband. He suggested she was stressed about work and should take a few days off. She didn't take time off, but she decided that when she had the dream a 4th time on November 17th, she would take a different route to work the next morning, even though it would add 30 minutes to her commute. November 18th, 1989, she took a later train on a different line. Her usual train, the one she would have been on, caught fire in the King's Cross St. Pancras tube station. 31 people died in what became known as the King's Cross Fire, one of London's worst underground disasters. The fire was caused by a match or cigarette dropped on a wooden escalator, which ignited accumulated grease and debris. The fire spread with shocking speed, creating a flashover that trapped people on the platforms and in train cars. Many died from smoke inhalation in the tunnels. The woman's usual train was one of those trapped. If she had been on it, she would almost certainly have been among the casualties. Her dream had shown her fire, smoke, people screaming, and being trapped underground, all of which happened to the passengers on the train she didn't take. After the disaster, the woman tried to find other people who might have avoided the train because of premonitions. Through newspaper appeals, she connected with 3 other regular commuters on that route who reported having changed their plans on November 18th because of bad feelings or disturbing dreams about their commute. One man reported dreaming about being trapped in a dark place full of smoke and decided to drive to work instead. A woman reported waking up with an overwhelming sense that she should not take her usual train and called in sick. 4 people who regularly took that train route changed their plans on November 18th because of dreams or premonitions. All 4 would likely have been on trains affected by the King's Cross fire. The collapsing bridge. In 2007, a structural engineer who had worked on bridge inspections in Minnesota, though not on the I-35W bridge specifically, began having recurring dreams about a bridge collapse. The dreams showed a major bridge in an urban area falling during rush hour, with cars sliding into the water. The engineer wasn't particularly superstitious and didn't believe in prophetic dreams. He mentioned the dreams to his wife as interesting from a psychological perspective. Perhaps his unconscious was processing stress about bridge safety, a topic he worked with professionally. But as the dreams continued, they became more specific. He could see the structure of the bridge in his dreams, a steel truss arch design. He could see the river below. He could even see what appeared to be traffic cameras mounted on the bridge structure. On August 1st, 2007, the day of the collapse, the engineer had plans to drive across the I-35W bridge that evening on his way to a dinner appointment. That afternoon, he had a strong feeling, connected to his recurring dreams, that he should take a different route. He changed his plans and took a bridge several miles upstream. That evening, at 6:05 p.m., the I-35W bridge collapsed. Over 100 vehicles were on the bridge at the time. The engineer's usual route across that bridge would have put him on it at almost exactly the time of collapse. When he learned about the disaster, the engineer reviewed his dreams in detail. The bridge in his dreams had been a steel truss arch, which matched the I-35W design. The river and urban setting matched. Even some of the structural details matched the actual bridge, though he consciously had no detailed knowledge of that specific bridge's design. The official NTSB investigation determined that the bridge collapsed due to undersized gusset plates in the truss design, a flaw that had existed since the bridge was constructed in 1967. The hotel fire. In 1980, a woman traveling for business checked into the MGM Grand Hotel in Las Vegas. She was scheduled to stay for 3 nights for a conference. The first night, she had a disturbing dream about fire alarms and smoke filling her hotel room. The dream was vivid enough that when she woke, she immediately located the emergency exits on her floor and mentally rehearsed the evacuation route. She even counted the number of doors between her room and the nearest stairwell so she could find it in darkness or smoke. The second night, she had the dream again, more intensely. This time, she dreamed of flames visible outside her window and people trapped in their rooms. When she woke, she was disturbed enough to consider checking out of the hotel early. But she had paid in advance, and leaving would mean missing the conference she'd traveled to attend. Instead, she made a different decision. She moved her belongings, clothes, documents, laptop, into a bag that she kept by the door, ready to grab. She left her room key in an accessible location. She went to bed fully clothed instead of in pajamas. On the third night, November 21st, 1980, fire broke out at the MGM Grand Hotel. The fire started in a ground-floor restaurant and spread rapidly through the casino area. Toxic smoke traveled through the building's air conditioning system and elevator shafts, reaching upper floors where most guests were sleeping. The woman woke to smoke pouring into her room through the ventilation system. She immediately grabbed her pre-packed bag, wet a towel to cover her face, and crawled to the hallway. The woman's pre-planning saved her life. She knew exactly how many doors to her emergency exit. She counted them while crawling through the smoke-filled hallway. She knew the stairwell would be safer than the elevators. She had her essential belongings with her and could focus entirely on escaping rather than gathering items. She made it out of the building and watched as firefighters fought the blaze and rescued guests from upper floors. 85 people died in the MGM Grand fire, most from smoke inhalation. Over 700 were injured. the Avalanche Warning. In 1999, a ski instructor in the French Alps began having recurring dreams about an avalanche. The dreams showed a specific slope she recognized, an area where she frequently took clients for lessons. In the dreams, the entire mountainside came sliding down, burying skiers and the ski lodge at the base of the slope. The dreams troubled her, but avalanches were a known risk in the Alps. The area had avalanche control measures, and the slope she dreamed about was considered relatively safe. She mentioned the dreams to her supervisor, but was told not to worry. The slope was monitored and would be closed if avalanche danger was high. But the dreams persisted through late December and into January 2000. They became more specific. She could see the exact time, late afternoon, and the exact conditions, heavy fresh snow after a warm period. In mid-January, weather conditions matched what she had dreamed. Several days of unseasonably warm weather followed by heavy snowfall. Avalanche danger was elevated, but not critical. The slope remained open. On January 18th, the ski instructor told her supervisor she would not take clients to that slope. She said she had a strong feeling something was wrong and preferred to use other areas of the resort. Her supervisor was annoyed, but agreed to reassign her. That afternoon, at approximately 3:45 p.m., a massive avalanche came down the slope the instructor had dreamed about. The avalanche buried part of the ski lodge and several skiers who had been on the slope. 12 people died, and many more were injured. The avalanche was triggered by the exact conditions the instructor had dreamed: heavy, fresh snow on top of an unstable layer created by the warm period. The timing was late afternoon, matching her dreams. The scope and location were exactly as she had seen them in her sleep. Several of her regular clients had requested lessons on that slope for the afternoon of January 18th. If she had taken them as scheduled, some or all of them would likely have been caught in the avalanche. The child who wouldn't fly. In 2009, a family in France was preparing for a vacation to the Comoros Islands. Their teenage daughter was excited about the trip. It was her first time flying internationally. But the week before departure, she began having nightmares about the plane crashing. The dreams were distressing. She saw the plane falling from the sky into the ocean. She saw people struggling in the water. She woke up terrified and crying. The daughter told her parents about the dreams and begged them to cancel the trip. Her parents dismissed the dreams as pre-flight anxiety. Flying was statistically very safe. There was no reason to cancel an expensive vacation because of nightmares. But as the departure date approached, the daughter's anxiety intensified. She had the crash dream every night. She began saying she would refuse to board the plane. 2 days before the scheduled flight, the family reached a compromise. The daughter would stay with her grandmother in France rather than going on the vacation. The rest of the family would fly to the Comoros as planned. On June 30th, 2009, Yemenia Flight 626 crashed into the Indian Ocean while approaching the Comoros Islands. The Airbus A310 went down just miles from the destination airport. Of the 153 people aboard, only one survived, a 12-year-old girl who was found clinging to wreckage. The flight the family had been booked on was not Flight 626. They were scheduled on a different carrier's flight that arrived several hours earlier, but Flight 626 was traveling the same route to the same destination and crashed during the same period the daughter's family would have been in Comorian airspace. When the daughter learned about the crash, she had a breakdown. She was convinced that her dreams had been warning her family about that specific disaster, even though they hadn't been on that specific flight. The factory explosion. In 2013, a chemical plant worker in Texas began having dreams about an explosion at his facility. The dreams showed a specific building, the fertilizer storage warehouse, exploding with massive force, destroying surrounding structures and causing fires. The worker had been employed at the plant for 15 years and knew the facility well. He understood that the fertilizer stored there, ammonium nitrate, was potentially explosive if not properly stored, but the facility had safety protocols and there had never been incidents. Nevertheless, the dreams troubled him. After having the dream 5 nights in a row, he decided to take action. He reported his concerns to his supervisor, though he didn't mention the dreams. He knew that would sound irrational. Instead, he framed it as a safety concern, based on his observation that safety protocols around the fertilizer storage might not be adequate. his supervisor dismissed the concerns. The facility was in compliance with all regulations. Inspections had been conducted. There was no evidence of any safety issue. The dreams continued. The worker became convinced something terrible was going to happen. On April 17, 2013, he called in sick, something he rarely did. He told his wife he couldn't shake a bad feeling about going to work that day. That evening, the West Fertilizer Company plant exploded. The blast was so powerful it registered as a 2.1 magnitude earthquake. It killed 15 people, injured over 160, and destroyed or damaged over 150 buildings. The worker's warehouse, the specific building he had dreamed about exploding, was at the center of the blast. If he had been at work, he would almost certainly have been among the casualties. Investigation revealed that the facility had been storing far more ammonium nitrate than regulations allowed, and that safety protocols were inadequate. The concert that wasn't attended. In 2017, a young woman in Manchester, England, had tickets to see Ariana Grande perform at Manchester Arena. She had been looking forward to the concert for months. But 3 days before the concert, she began having disturbing dreams. The dreams showed chaos at a concert venue, people running, screaming, confusion, and terror. She couldn't see what was causing the panic, but the fear in the dreams was overwhelming. She dreamed about the Manchester Arena specifically. She recognized the venue's distinctive architecture. The woman told her friend, who was supposed to attend the concert with her, about the dreams. Her friend suggested she was just anxious about the crowd. But the dreams continued and intensified. On May 20th, 2 days before the concert, she had the dream 3 times in one night. She woke up convinced that something terrible was going to happen at the concert. She called her friend and said she didn't want to go. Her friend was disappointed but understood. They agreed to skip the concert and sell their tickets. On May 22, 2017, Ariana Grande's concert at Manchester Arena ended at 10:30 p.m. As concertgoers were leaving, a suicide bomber detonated an explosive device in the arena's foyer, killing 22 people and injuring 139. Most of the victims were children and teenagers. The woman watched the news coverage in horror. Her dreams had shown her chaos at Manchester Arena, and exactly that had occurred. Through social media, she connected with 2 other ticket holders who reported having decided not to attend because of bad feelings or anxiety about the concert. The Hurricane Evacuation. In 2005, a New Orleans resident began having disturbing dreams in late August. The dreams showed her neighborhood underwater, houses destroyed, people on rooftops waiting for rescue. She saw the Superdome filled with refugees. She saw her own house submerged to the roofline. The woman lived in a low-lying area near Lake Pontchartrain. She knew flooding was a risk during hurricanes, but her house had never flooded in the 40 years she'd lived there. New Orleans had weathered many hurricanes, but the dreams persisted and intensified. On August 26th, when Hurricane Katrina was still in the Gulf of Mexico and forecasters were uncertain about its track, the woman told her family they needed to evacuate immediately. Her family was skeptical. The storm might not even hit New Orleans. Evacuation was expensive and disruptive, but the woman was adamant. She'd had the dreams 5 nights in a row. Something terrible was going to happen. On August 27th, the family packed essentials and drove to relatives in Mississippi. On August 28th, the mandatory evacuation order was issued for New Orleans, but by then, highways were gridlocked. The family was already safe. August 29th, Hurricane Katrina struck. The levees failed. The woman's neighborhood was completely flooded. Her house was submerged exactly as she'd seen in her dreams. Water to the roofline. The Superdome became a refuge of last resort. Over 1,800 people died. The woman's early evacuation, prompted by dreams, not by official warnings, saved her family. They avoided the dangerous highway gridlock that trapped many evacuees. 15 dreams, 15 disasters that people saw coming before they happened. 15 decisions to trust something irrational, a nightmare, a feeling, a vision during sleep, instead of following normal routines. The skeptic's explanation is always available: coincidence, anxiety expressed as dreams, unconscious processing of real risks that the waking mind missed. Maybe the doctor detected his tumor through subtle symptoms his conscious mind ignored. Maybe the engineer noticed structural problems he didn't consciously register. Maybe the mother's worry about her son translated into a specific scenario that happened to match reality. But that explanation becomes harder when you look at the details. Errol Mai Jones told her mother about her death 2 weeks before it happened. The Titanic dreamers canceled expensive tickets days before sailing because of ships they saw sinking in their sleep. The 9/11 businessman stayed home from work because he'd spent 3 nights watching towers collapse in his dreams. These weren't vague worries. They were specific images, precise locations, exact scenarios. And when the disasters happened, they matched what had been dreamed with an accuracy that's difficult to dismiss. What happens in the brain during sleep that allows some people to see forward in time? We don't know. What signals are being received? What patterns detected? What information processed through dreams that the waking mind can't access? Science doesn't have answers yet. What we do have is documentation. People who told others about their dreams before disasters occurred. People who changed their plans and survived. People who ignored warnings and died. The evidence exists even if the explanation doesn't. Maybe you've had a dream that felt different from normal dreams, more vivid, more real, more urgent. A dream that stayed with you all day instead of fading in minutes. A dream that made you change your plans even though you felt foolish doing it. If that happens, listen. The 15 people in this video are alive because they did.